So the Russian economy is in the toilet. And I'm not making that up. I'm not being facetious. I'm going to show you a lot of evidence of all kinds of bad things that are happening to the Russian economy. And what's remarkable about this is I just did this video 2 days ago going through the month of June. Nothing I'm going to show you right now is duplicative of that. This is beyond what I showed you for the last 3 weeks of things that were going wrong in the Russian economy. So it's mind numbing. We're going to start with this from RT. What the commentator here is going to say, well, everything's going great and we're doing fine and we've made the right investments. But what he's not saying between the lines is the problem. Let's listen to this for just a moment. This is RT.
We can see that the Russian economy has grown above 4% over the past 2 years. 4%. This is a good result. This is higher than the average growth of the global economy. How was this achieved? You know, we took economic and financial issues very seriously as a government. Who to support, where to focus our financial resources.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. First, I don't believe the 4%. Second, if they are focusing, why is the government focusing the resources? It's because they're focusing on the military sector, and that's taking away from the rest of the economy, and that's going to be really problematic. Creates massive dislocation, and small businesses go under, and things like that. Okay,
and
let's
I
keep
want
going.
to say that I think we succeeded because we supported people. By the way, real incomes of the population increased by more than 7% last year.
Real incomes by 7%. Okay, a real income is the income of individuals after adjusting for inflation. It went up by 7%. That can't possibly be right when the interest rate has been in double digits because of the war. So he's just, that this can't possibly be true. Like, you're defying the laws of economics by saying what he's saying. Okay, then you had Putin. Putin was in Belarus. He was making this big statement about things. And here we are, 6.3% of Russia's GDP for defense is only 13.5 trillion rubles, 1.72 or 172 billion US dollars. And he goes on and says, our entire GDP is 223 trillion rubles. So is 13.5 from 223 a lot or a little? Okay, so that's the argument he's trying to make here, that it's not really that much, right? And we paid for it with inflation, but we are now fighting this inflation, and that's going to be important. We'll come back to that. And yes, we are purposely moving toward a soft landing for the economy. Asking a former KGB guy about economics, it seems like a silly thing to be doing. Let's go back to this idea that 13.5 out of 223, it doesn't sound like a lot, right? I mean, when you're saying you're only 6% of Russia's GDP is for defense, but 6.3% of GDP, 6 to 7% of GDP is also 33% of the entire federal budget for all of Russia. So they're spending an awful lot of their budget on the military. And when you put it in those terms, it sounds a lot different. Okay, now let's compare this to the former Soviet Union. They were spending 13, 12, 11, 10 by 1991 because they couldn't sustain it all, from 13 to 10% of GDP. So they were only at 6.5% or so of GDP. But that also meant 50% of their budget to 43% of their budget. Again, it wasn't sustainable. This is why Glasnost and Perestroika actually happened, openness and reform, because they were like, you know what, we can't really hold this thing together because we're spending too much. We don't have enough coming in. And that's where Russia is right now. Russian banks fear a debt crisis is coming as war strains the economy. This just came, like the articles I'm about to show you just came out in the last 24 hours. Well, maybe 30 hours now. I mean, it's beyond the other video that I showed you the other day. Russia's bank fears debt crisis is coming as war strains the economy. Debt crisis looms as Russia banks sound the alarm, according to Bloomberg. Russia's banking sector is facing mounting pressure, with the true scale of problem potentially far more serious than the Kremlin publicly admits. This was reported on Bloomberg yesterday. Representatives of Russia's financial sector are privately sounding the alarm over a growing volume of overdue debt, both from corporate and retail clients. High interest rates have made it increasingly difficult to service loans, while deferred payments are masking the scope of the actual problems. Everything's fine. Nothing to see here. Problem loans are already estimated in the trillions of rubles, exceeding 12 billion US dollars, forcing banks to scale back lending. And then when that seizes up, then they can't get business loans, and then businesses start to either unwind, slow down, or collapse. In January to February 2025 alone, corporate lending portfolios shrank by approximately $19 billion. That's not a healthy sign for the economy. Now, these two things I did talk about the other day. Maxim Resnikov warned of potential recession at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. Quote, "We are on the verge of slipping into a recession," he said, and that he was chastised for saying, well, say something positive. And then central bank head Elvira Nabiulina acknowledged the need for economic cooling, but then Vladimir Putin insisted publicly that a recession must be avoided. But how do you do this without defying the laws of economics? Russian banks are posting record profits in 2024 of $42.5 billion, but there's rising inflation up to 10% and a steep increase in the central bank's key interest rate, peaking at 21%. Like, you have the central interest rate at 21%. Like, we balk about it when it's like 6%, 7%. Like that's crazy to our minds. They're at 21%, later adjusted down only to 20%, but that was all for show. Bloomberg highlights a two-track economy. This is what's going on in Russia right now. A two-track economy in Russia, while the defense industrial complex thrives on state funding. And that's kind of what the guy in the first video was alluding to, was the central bank is really focused on military stuff, and they're doing fine. But the private sector is really in the toilet. It's suffering from declining demand and rising costs, not enough workers, all kinds of maladies. Okay, so with that, let's look at this. The UK and EU unleashed a wave of shadow fleet sanctions back in May. Something really big happened now. The sanctions knocked out a good chunk of the shadow fleet, so Russia's having to use more Western Greek oil tankers. So sanctions are working. So the oil is going down. And with that, let's look at this. The peace dividend, oil market celebrates Trump-brokered peace as price drops below 70. Okay, so like at 80, that's where somewhere around there is where the budget is. And if you're down in 60, like, wow, it's really hurting the Russians. Okay, so now what happened with the war? Didn't the war spike the price of oil? Well, yes, I'll show you. Between June 12th and June 23rd, Israeli forces, later joined by the U.S., carried out that bombing campaign. So let's look and see. I'll show you on the chart in just a moment. Oil is falling so much now. It's now cheaper than when it was before the Iran-Israeli conflict. This came out 2 days ago. Bad news for the Russian economy, which of course means good news for the rest of the world. Here's the chart. Here is the 12th. This is the 12th. Okay. So this is where it was, and then it spiked. And then it dropped back like a rock. It's now actually slightly below where it was before. The price of Urals oil, that's what Russia is trying to export. So, okay. And then if you look at other sectors, you see things like furniture down 15%, household appliances down 20%, lamps and lighting equipment down 20%. It's like all kinds of bad. I mean, it's just, okay. There's a few places. Manufacturing of soap detergents doing pretty well. Was doing well until May, but pretty much everything's in the yellow or the red. Okay, so they're really, really struggling. Now, what can they do about this? Well, armed forces have already occupied the second of 4 lithium deposits in Ukraine, and they could just steal the minerals from the ground, and that's what Trump was trying to do with that minerals deal. And this is what the playbook was with Hitler in World War II: was conquer an area, take their stuff, steal all the stuff that you can, and then you're a little bit stronger. You could do that, or like Russia was dealing with India today, talking about the delivery of S-400s, and they had a deal for $5.5 billion, and 3 systems were delivered. Another one is on its way, but one is going to be in 2026 and the next in 2027 because they don't have enough for them. But I'm not sure that the war between Israel and Iran is going to be a great advertisement for their military sales. Like, I don't know that they're going to sell as much as they used to. Khamenei said, "I offer my congratulations on the victory over the fallacious Zionist regime." Okay, and your victory was a wonderful demonstration of Russian military hardware. So if oil drops, and a lot of the budget's depending on that, and military hardware drops, and there's a good chunk dependent on that, what's going to happen? Here is Steve Rosenberg from the BBC reading the news in Russia. I started at this point, and I want to show you just a minute so you can hear what they're talking about in Russian newspapers about the state of the economy. It's bad when they're talking about it there. Listen to all the different sectors affected negatively.
For Russia. In the Russian economy, the problem of payment arrears is growing. The cut in the central bank's key rate from 21% to 20% won't fix things, say MPs. The problem of payment arrears due to the abnormally high central bank key rate is becoming increasingly obvious due to the rise in bills payable by enterprises and from the surge in wage arrears. Payment arrears may increase further since the symbolic central bank key rate cut is unlikely to improve the situation in the economy. That's the feeling in the Duma. Experts say that so far the following branches of the economy have suffered: coal mining, repair and assembly of machinery and equipment, metallurgy, storage facilities, crop production and animal farming, electric, gas and steam energy, oil refining, oil and natural gas extraction, vehicle production, rail, ship and aircraft manufacturing, production of metalware and so on.
Yeah, they're in real trouble all across multiple sectors within the Russian economy. But, military is still doing pretty good. I mean, if you're building for the military, you're in good shape until the war is over and then you're out of business and there's massive dislocation. Okay, Putin spoke about the state of the Russian economy with this face. Just keep that in mind. Like, this is what he talked about today as he was talking about how NATO is bad and they're warmongers and trying to cause this by increasing their production, their rate from up to 5%. Well, they're already at 6 point something percent, and they're not warmongering with. It's really hard to keep up. All right, my friends, the Russian economy is stable and doing well. And also Putin, we'll leave you with that as an image as we leave. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, shares, and the subscribes. Put your comments below. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.